Hi, I'm Michelle, and welcome to the Grateful Podcast, a place where we contemplate how we can eat, live, and lead each day to build a more sustainable world. My guest on the show today is the fabulous Ronni Kahn. You might recognize Ronni from a film that was made about her last year called Food Fighter, which documents her work as the founder and CEO of OzHarvest, the leading food rescue organisation in Australia that has now been replicated in other parts of the world. Ronni started OzHarvest in 2004 on the side of a full-time job because she wanted to do something that would stop food waste while also nourishing people who were experiencing food insecurity. Now, what I love about Ronni is that she also pushes for system change, understanding that beyond the important work of her organisation, we need to change mindsets and policies to build a better food system that avoids this paradox of food waste and hunger in the first place. I spoke to Ronni just before the release of her brand new book called A Repurposed Life, and we chatted about how she found and embraced her purpose of nourishing the country and eliminating food waste, and what she's learned along her journey, which I think can inspire all of us. I'd actually love to tell you how I came to learn about OzHarvest, because I've lived out of Australia for a long time. And I learned about it because my mum was one of your very, very excited volunteers.
In which city?
In Perth.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. And so actually before we had this call, I wanted to chat with my mum and find out what it was that she loved so much about volunteering for OzHarvest. And she told me that she felt always like what she did mattered, and that someone would directly benefit. She felt like she was a part of a family and was valued and listened to. She said she always had the chance to learn from the other volunteers because they were from such diverse backgrounds and they had so much fun together. And that was the key word for her, whether it was rescuing food off planes or washing pots or teaching nutrition classes, it was always fun. And she said, and that comes from the top. And that's you.
That is very precious to hear because that is what you hope your culture embodies, and it seems to trickle down and ripple through, but when you hear it coming back, that's very, very fulfilling and enriching.
Oh, wonderful. And I would love to hear more from you about your approach to building community and leading a massive team of volunteers, which is something that's notoriously difficult to do. And it also seems to be the backbone of your organizations.
I guess the most important thing for me is that every single person who is connected in any way with OzHarvest understands we are here for one purpose. And that one purpose is to make an impact and to make a difference to either those that connect with us or those whose lives we touch through all of the different avenues that we reach out. And so in that respect, that to me is the most important thing, the gratitude that we feel for what it is we do and for those that join us on that journey. So that really informs the way we look at the volunteers that come to work with us, because quite honestly, they're exactly the same as my staff, except that they're even more precious because they've chosen to do this and give us the generosity of their time. So the first thing I ever say at a volunteer induction or volunteer info day is, we will never take you for granted. We will never, ever assume that your time is not precious and that you've chosen to give your time to us. And I think it just really just rolls on from there, that the roles that we have all matter. We could never afford to hire the people that volunteer for us, and that those people do come in and join our family. And that's how I believe we treat all of our people. And yeah, so it's incredibly rewarding. It's rewarding for me when, I meet volunteers, see them in action, And they are the ambassadors of our organization. So how we treat our people is fundamental to how we believe they should be treated.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And it does form the backbone of success of what you do, and that spills out and you feel it. I felt it with every interaction I've had with OzHarvest. So that's amazing.
Yeah. There is an energy around us and a passion and a commitment, and there isn't a single person who works for us or who volunteers for us who either doesn't believe in our cause, know exactly what we stand for. And you can ask anyone in our organization that our purpose is to nourish our country, and then how we do that. And we do that in 4 ways. We rescue, we educate, we engage, and we innovate. Everybody from our drivers to our volunteers know that.
And it does seem like the key word for my mum was fun. And that's, I think, such an important part of making a contribution. But in the line of work you do, it's inevitable that it's not always fun. There are emotional ups and downs. And I'd love to know more about what's your approach to managing this inevitable roller coaster that you experience in this type of work.
Well, I don't experience a roller coaster because I've chosen not to. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a choice as to how we manage our lives. And it absolutely starts with gratitude. And it starts with waking up every single day to know that we have a choice to be grumpy, we have a choice to be happy, we have a choice to impact others. And so quite honestly, there are challenges that one faces, but it's how you face them. And so I'm quite painful in that every interviewer says, so tell us about the tough times and tell us about the challenging, terrible times. And quite honestly, there absolutely, of course, there are difficult choices one has to make, but it's one's attitude to how you approach those. So again, always with the end goal in sight that we are here to make sure that good food doesn't go to waste, and that instead of going to waste, it goes to feed hungry people. And because we know how much food is going to waste, we have to fundamentally shift that as well. And so the way I go about challenges is breaking them down as to how can I get through them? How can I get over them, or how can I get around them? And I don't allow them to knock me over, but my job is to knock them over.
That's a beautiful approach to it. We were talking about this the other day with a group that, we can think about these ups and downs of life like a wheel. And if you're always sitting on the rim and spinning around, it's going to be very volatile. But if you can find your way to that central spoke and observe it, you're also better able to use your energy to jump around or go over those challenges.
Yeah, and there's a core focus. There's a core, as you say, you can call it your center, you can call it whatever you like, but the point is, it's about not being distracted by the things that you can't shift, change, fix, but managing the ones you can and getting around the one.
And so on that note, a major challenge that we've faced as a global society these last month is the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. So how has that impacted your work and the people you serve, and how have you gone about facing this challenge?
Yeah, so we started March 2020 after having begun the year in Australia with massive bushfires. And those bushfires had enormous effect on every part of life. They had effect on those individuals who were affected, our country, our land, and how it affected us. One, we amplified our efforts to support people in fire-affected areas, but it did mean that in Australia, for the first time, this was one of the biggest fundraising periods that our country's ever experienced. Hundreds of millions of dollars were raised for bushfires, which meant that when those bushfires eased off, donor fatigue is a very huge element we were facing. So number one, all money had gone to rescue, to not to feeding people, but to fires. And so by March, when our major fundraiser is always scheduled, a fundraiser that yields us around $3 million, it was scheduled to go ahead, but we'd already forecast that there would be a significant downturn to that. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it meant that, number one, that particular event couldn't take place. And all of our other revenue streams, which are all face-to-face engagement, we lost. So we went into COVID with a loss of around $5.5 million on our annual sustainable budget.
Wow.
Which meant, okay, so first of all, we had to work out my commitment internally to myself was I'm not losing a single person. And secondly, we're not going to stop servicing those that need it. So our front line never stopped. We had 2 days where we had a scare that someone within our team was close to someone who had COVID. We closed the business down for 2 days in March, sterilized, cleaned out the business, cleaned out the trucks, and then put in place our COVID plan, which was all frontline staff would work, everybody else would work from home, and we'd focus on food rescue and food relief. And that's really what we did. So we redeployed staff. We have activated around 28 new programs. My staff and my team are just extraordinary because we literally recalibrated the business and created hamper hubs and food boxes for people who couldn't go to charities. And so we've rolled out opportunities for people to get these boxes. We have mobile markets going around the country into regional Australia, delivering fresh food. We have cooked about, I think it's 1 million meals that we've delivered out through the last 3 months. We've delivered 10 million meals in total with all of our different programs over and above food rescues. So extraordinary stats. And that we got government funding. We lobbied. The government was handing out budget stimuli to different businesses, but the charitable sector was forgotten. But I pulled together a group and we lobbied, and the government did give $250 million to our sector. It actually hasn't finished that. But one of the challenges, when you ask me about challenges, is what happens when that funding runs out and the programs that we've created. So I'm just getting all the evidence about the impact of those, so I can go back to government and say, well, you tell me your problems will be greater if we don't get more money to deliver these programs.
Because that's something I find really interesting about your work. Tackling food waste is interesting as a charity because you're kind of filling a hole where government and essentially markets have somewhat failed, both people and in resource allocation. And what I love about what you're doing is that you are simultaneously campaigning for policy change and lobbying the government for change. I think that's quite rare to see activity in both spaces like that.
Most charities want to fix a problem, put a Band-Aid on it. Actually, not fix a problem, Band-Aid it. And that's never what I wanted to do. When I set up OzHarvest, I thought, I'll just do this until we run out of food and I've fed everyone I need to feed. I didn't know that in Australia there were 5 million people who needed food. I also didn't know that a third of all food produced goes to waste. And so the minute those two things started falling into place, that's when I realized we had to become advocates, activists, lobbyists, and on the one hand, bring down food waste, but on the other, upskill vulnerable people so that they didn't need that food, so that if we could educate enough people to stop wasting food, we wouldn't have a problem of what to feed people. And so that's really been our goal. That's why we have those 4 pillars. The rescue is to make sure good food doesn't go to waste, but the educate is to educate both vulnerable people and consumers, citizens, all of us, on how to value food. Mm. And if anything's come out of COVID, I think it's been the value of food. More people are cooking, more people have taken the time to really spend time over meals with their family, which is so precious. And I hope we don't lose that.
Yeah, I hope not as well. And I think the more work I do in this space, the more and more it just comes down to this question of we need to appropriately value food.
Absolutely. And our food is too cheap. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say. And I personally don't want to pay more, mm-hmm. but we must pay more because it's insane. We've got to look after our land, our soil, and then we need to be eating the best quality and not filling it up with pesticides, and we need to have more land to produce more food. Yeah.
Absolutely. So all this work in this space, how has it changed how you personally eat, shop, and cook?
Well, I can show you my little veggie patch on my deck of my apartment. But absolutely. I mean, we came up with a mantra, look, buy, store, cook, which is look what's in your fridge and make a list and buy what you need, cook it, and store it properly. And so, of course, the whole notion of the valuing food is buying appropriately and then using it, storing it. And then if you do have leftovers, use them. And if you have compost. Organic waste should go to compost. So I try and live as much by that as possible. Mm-hmm. And that definitely is a shift from how I would have lived before I knew all of this. Absolutely. But it takes effort. And I can say that there are times when even walking down to my compost bin feels, that's quite hard. So for the uninitiated or people who don't know, we just cannot blame anybody. We just have to reshift. We have to shift our behavior. We have to shift how we think so that at least we've got people appropriately thinking about how to purchase, how to use, and how not to waste.
Absolutely. And if I understand correctly, you used to run a catering business. Is that true?
I was in the hospitality industry, so I saw food going to waste all the time. I would hire caterers. I would order food. I would make sure that there was always tables groaning so that people left thinking, oh my God, these people are so generous. There was all this wonderful food. And that's really what triggered starting OzHarvest.
Yeah, I think that's common in many places, that value is shown in quantity, not in quality. Yeah,
absolutely.
I was actually struck. So last time I was in Sydney, I was in your offices, and I love this mural you have on the wall that kind of charts the history of OzHarvest. And I was really impressed to see, I guess you started back in 2004 with sort of one truck and maybe you and I don't know, maybe some other people. Can you take us back to a couple? Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I started, 2004 is the official launch date of OzHarvest, but it took a year to set up. And prior to that, my sons and I would just take my work car and drop off food. And 2004 is when we started. 2005, we had laws changed in New South Wales to allow good food to be given away for free, because although people were starting to give me food, I started getting a couple of the big businesses saying we couldn't give you food because we worried about our liability. So we had the laws changed in 4 states, and the other states have followed, to allow good food to be given away for free. Which then changed the whole dialogue and the ability for people to give away their food, and ramped up all of our programs. Then we started delving into education, and we now have 5 education programs, and then all of our engagement with volunteers, with corporates. So statistically, we have now just delivered around 100. In our first year, we delivered approximately 600,000 meals. And we've now just celebrated, I think, 138 million meals that we delivered, rescued and delivered. We have a fleet of about 65 vehicles. And we're in every state. And we've shared our model globally in New Zealand, the UK, South Africa.
Phenomenal.
And other countries have taken bits of our model, or we share as much as we can with people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. And so it sounds like this moment was when you sort of stepped into a calling and a purpose for yourself. And I'm interested to know how that process was for you. Were you designing and journaling, or did you see a need and you stepped into it?
Yeah, I don't journal. If only I had. Writing my book would have been so much easier. But I saw a need, stepped into it, and then it overtook my life, and it became the passion. I was always passionate. I loved what I did. I loved my events. I had a boutique event management company, and I loved that and gave it my all. But something took over when there was this notion of helping others and affecting our planet. And I didn't know then that this was my sacred duty, but it certainly. So for the first 7 years, I worked full-time in my business while I was growing OzHarvest, and then reached that point that the board said, well, if we had you full-time, maybe it would be better. And it fundamentally has changed OzHarvest and our profile. And so I knew the moment when I was galvanized into action, because I've been thinking about what would make a difference to my life. How could I do something significant? And it was just seeing an entrepreneur, an activist in South Africa, a mentor of mine, visiting her, understanding what she was doing, and then just knowing that I wanted to know what that felt like. And that really was the galvanization into action. And I do know that sometimes over the last 15, 16, almost nearly getting to 17 years, that there have been people who've heard me and have chosen to do something on the basis of that. So again, it comes back to that enormous gratitude every single day for having found a gift and being able to do what it is that I do, that I will never take for granted.
I think that's so true what you just said, that you have inspired a lot of other people to action. And I organized a screening of your film here in Zurich last year, and everybody found it incredibly inspiring and motivating. And one of the questions that people had, the first thing a lot of people were saying is, I need mala in my life. And the other thing that people were saying was, wow, you seem to have so much energy and so much motivation. What do you do to conserve that and preserve it and reconnect to it when it feels depleted?
So when you're doing what you love to do, and I'm inspired every day by the people around me, by what I do, and I'm in awe that I've inspired a single person. So from that point of view, it's this waking up every single day with gratitude. I do yoga. I have a spiritual teacher who I met 17 years ago, who has absolutely fundamentally taught me that all we have is now, and that all we have is now to be the very best we can be, and that if you serve people, and actually serving food is one of the biggest gifts you can do, And so I'm very mindful of that. I'm very much about being in the present, in the now. So when people say to me, what's going to happen in a year's time? I have no idea. All I can be responsible for is right now. And it doesn't mean I don't run my business with strategies and vision, but really it's what we do now that counts. And so I surround myself with my precious people. I don't spend time with people who don't either inspire me or I can learn from or I can just enjoy and have fun with. I love my children. I spend as much time with them as possible. I've got grandchildren now, so I'm triply blessed, quadruply blessed. And so, yeah, it's just about really, really, really being present and, yeah, just taking the time to acknowledge all of what we've got.
I couldn't agree more with those words, the power of presence. Yeah. And this idea of who we surround ourselves with is so important. And you have so many amazing people surrounding you in this organization. I wanted to know, what are some of the most important life lessons that you've learned from the people that your programs serve?
So before I answer that, I just want to acknowledge that I say I'm a magnet for magnificent people because all these awesome people surround me. So that is fantastic. And I think the lessons that I've learned from the people that we serve is that there, but for the grace of God, go I. There is absolutely no logical reason why they or any single one of them is on that side of the fence and I am on this side of the fence. And it could happen to me, you, any of us. And so I have no judgment about why somebody needs food, support, help, which is why I am so committed to creating our free supermarket or handing out produce with respect and dignity so people don't have to feel that they have to be ashamed to get what they need, because it is the luck of the draw and it is really hard to understand why somebody has fallen through the cracks and things have gone wrong for them. And so I always want to put myself in their shoes. What would it feel like? And that's really that's what I'm mindful of every single day. Mm-hmm. What would it feel like to have to need food, to have to need everything, you know?
Yeah. And why is it that we continue to let these cracks be there for people to fall through?
Yeah, and so my commitment is to try and raise people up as best we can. And I only say raising because for whatever reason, it seems that they've fallen. And again, it's with no judgment, but how can we find the best ways we can to empower people? So that is that duality that I deal with. Get food, feed it, but minimize food waste. Educate people who've got food how to appreciate it, and educate people who don't have food how best to utilize it when they do get it.
A best case would be that OzHarvest doesn't exist.
Oh, that's my goal. My goal has always been to put ourselves out of business. Yeah, and I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I hope it does.
So wrapping all this up, I would love to know what living a great and full life means for you.
So for me, living a great and full life is being in appreciation and being in gratitude for the great things in life and the things that make me full. And the things that make me full are the love of my friends, my people, my children, and the commitment and passion that I can bring to making a difference to as many people as possible. To me, that is what embodies a great life. Someone who can help others, and every single one of us can. And it doesn't have to be by starting a charity, and it doesn't have to be by doing anything that might seem great. Every single day we interact with people, and it's what that interaction looks like. How do we treat people, from the cleaner to the bus driver to the train conductor to the person we're buying our coffee from? It's in every interaction. Yeah. And being mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. The greatness is actually in the smallest of things.
Yeah, totally.
Beautiful. It's been such a pleasure, Ronni. Thank you for everything you do.
And thank you, Michelle, for creating Grateful and for putting out your book and for sharing all the tips and hints we can to live a sustainable life. It's all of the work that we all do that's going to make a difference. One person can't do it by themselves. We need all of us.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Grateful podcast. If you liked it, then please go ahead and subscribe and share it with a friend. And I would love to get your questions answered here. So if there's something that you would like answered or explored on this podcast, just send me an email to podcast@thegrateful.com and I'll do my very best to get your questions answered here on the show. Music in this episode came from Blue Dot Sessions.